Is a certain kind of person who makes you feel like they can see right through you, not in a threatening way, just quietly. They walk into a room and something shifts in them before anyone has said a word. No raised voices, no visible tension, nothing you could point to and explain. But their brain has already run the whole scan. The avoided glance across the table, the smile that arrived half a second too late. The sentence that sounded completely fine but carried a weight underneath it that nobody else seemed to catch. Most people hear about this kind of awareness and call it a gift. And in some ways it is, but here is what nobody talks about. The gift does not come with an off switch. Welcome to Decoded Psychology, where we go beneath the surface of everyday human behavior and uncover the forces quietly shaping who you are, how you connect, and why you think the way you do. Today we are decoding the psychology of people who are too aware, not just observant, not just empathetic, but carrying a kind of perception so deep it has become both their greatest strength and the thing that exhausts them most. Psychology points to two very different origins for this. The first is biological. Researcher Elaine Aron found that roughly 15 to 20% of people are born with a nervous system that processes sensory and emotional input far more deeply than average. Their brains are literally wired to pick up more, feel more, and filter less. The world comes to them in high resolution whether they asked for it or not. But the second origin is darker and far more common. Neuroscience calls it hypervigilance. It does not arrive at birth. It gets built, slowly, quietly, in environments where a child had no choice but to become a radar station. Think about what it means to grow up in a home where the emotional weather could shift without warning, where you learn to listen for the sound of car tires in the driveway to predict what kind of night it was going to be, where a kitchen cabinet slamming told you everything before anyone said a word. Children in that kind of uncertainty do not get to be innocent for long. Their amygdala, the brain's threat detection system, gets trained to stay on. Not occasionally, constantly. And over years, that survival mechanism stops feeling like fear and starts feeling like just the way they are. By the time they become adults, most of them have no idea that what they call overthinking was once the thing keeping them safe. The first sign in daily life is living in permanent analysis mode. A typical person gets a message from their boss that says, "Come see me for a minute later," and thinks nothing of it. An overly aware person reads those exact words and quietly spends the next hour reconstructing every interaction from the past week. They are not being dramatic. Their default mode network, the brain's system for self-referential thinking, simply never stops running. Half of them is present and responding normally. The other half is always taking notes. The second sign is that emotions never just get felt. They get audited. They feel sad and immediately question whether the sadness is justified. They laugh at something and a split second later find themselves wondering if the laugh sounded genuine. It is like trying to dance while watching yourself in a mirror the entire time. The steps might be correct, but the joy of moving has disappeared. The third sign shows up in relationships, and this one is quietly painful. When you can see the mechanics behind human behavior, the surface of interactions starts spiraling thin. A compliment lands and the brain immediately maps possible motives. An apology comes and something inside them waits for the layer underneath it. They do not become bitter. They just lose something most people never notice they have, which is the ability to receive kindness without analyzing it first. That creates a loneliness that is very hard to explain. The fourth sign is empathy that functions more like absorption. Mirror neuron research shows us that humans feel echoes of what others feel, but in overly aware people, that system runs at full volume all the time. They walk into a room and pick up on tension between two people who have not spoken in days. They sit next to a stranger whose foot is tapping with anxiety, and suddenly their own chest feels tighter for no reason they can name. They hold space for everyone around them with care that looks effortless from the outside. And they go home completely empty. The fifth sign lives in the body, because all of that processing does not stay in the mind. It lands in the nervous system. A slightly faster heartbeat gets flagged as danger. A moment of stillness fills with dread. The body becomes a second alarm system consta. not yet cross-referencing physical sensations against a threat database built years ago in a very different world. And eventually, all of this awareness stops being a lens for observing life and becomes a strategy for controlling it. They start running simulations. If this happens, here is what I will do. If that falls apart, here is how I will stay standing. What begins as intelligence quietly becomes a way of never being fully present, because presence requires the kind of uncertainty they have spent their whole life learning to prevent. Here is what actually helps, not becoming less aware. That was never the goal. The shift is learning to notice without carrying, recognizing that not every silence is a message meant for them, that not every feeling that enters a room belongs to them to fix. That insight without action is sometimes the most powerful response available. When overly aware people begin practicing this, something quietly extraordinary happens. The awareness does not disappear. It changes quality. It moves from something sharp and scanning to something warmer. They still see people clearly. They still feel the texture of a room the moment they enter. But they stop needing to solve everything. They stop preparing for every version of how things might go wrong. The depth they carry was never the problem. It was always the weight they were asked to carry it with. And the moment they put some of that weight down, everything they always were becomes something they can finally live inside of, rather than just observe from a careful distance. If you recognized yourself somewhere in this, you already know this was not just a video about psychology. Subscribe to Decoded Psychology, and every week we go a little deeper together. The next video might explain something about you that you have never quite been able to name.